1 year ago, I bought this Silverado EV. Not just to experience owning and using an electric truck, but to experience the most difficult use case for an electric truck, long-distance towing. And over the past year, I've used this to tow many things to many places, from Maine all the way to California. I've made several videos educating you on the ins and outs of electric truck life, and overall, I've had an excellent time. And owning this thing has been an absolutely wonderful experience. Or at least, it was a wonderful experience until it developed a small issue relating to DC fast charging in the middle of a 2,000-mile towing road trip that resulted in it being in service for a total of over 2 months, only for them to never figure out what the problem was and completely give up on it. What I took this truck into service for was a relatively small problem, but the resulting service experience was a big problem, and General Motors needs to make a change.
This is my message to whoever's at General Motors. Stop. Get some help.
By the way, if my voice sounds different, it's because I'm getting over a cold and a sinus infection, and seasonal allergies have just started. First, if you're not caught up, I've made 3 videos with this truck so far. One where I tell you why I bought it, all about it, and what I plan to do with it. One where I explain all the ins and outs of towing with an electric truck. And one where I take a 2,000-mile road trip in this whilst towing an entire car behind it, from Missouri all the way to California with Alec from Technology Connections. I've had a couple bad experiences with this truck. And good thing too, otherwise no one would watch this video. This is the internet. You don't want to hear about good things and positive experiences. You only want to hear about how you're being lied to and the next thing you should be mad about. But overall, my experience with this truck has been very positive and absolutely wonderful, and we're going to talk about the good stuff first. Gosh darn it! We'll get to the bad stuff later. You can just wait. I know I'll keep repeating this, but I'm going to say it again. This truck, and electric trucks in general, drive and tow just so well. There's boundless torque at every RPM. The gearbox is single speed, so you don't have any gear ratios to manage. And regenerative braking is so much better than any form of engine braking could ever hope to be. It's just so effortless. And the Silverado EV in particular is also the most stable tow vehicle I've ever experienced, but it weighs almost 9,000 pounds, so that's not really that surprising, is it? This is the best tow vehicle I've ever experienced. Obviously, towing with an electric truck comes with its limitations, but I've covered those extensively in a previous video, so go watch that if you have any questions. I have towed with this thing a lot for only having it a year. This trip was bringing home a city car. This trip was bringing home 2 commuter cars. This trip was picking up the amazing Electrac E15 from Maine. This was picking up and delivering Alec's Nissan Cube. On this trip, I took down an F-150 and brought back a Chevy Volt. And this big trip was the road trip video of taking a Coda out to California.
And of course, there's been a bunch of little local trips in between.
So the next time someone tells me electric trucks are no good for long distance towing, I'll just say, I don't know. Seemed to work okay for me. Granted, all of those trips would have been significantly more difficult, if not outright impossible, in any other electric truck. It's the Silverado EV with its over 200 kilowatt hour battery that made those trips not only possible, but pretty effortless. And of course, it's also great without a trailer. It has fully independent wishbone suspension and weighs as much as some buildings, so the ride quality is leaps and bounds better than a gas Silverado. It drives great from behind the wheel. You'd never know this weighs almost 9,000 pounds. It only feels like 8,000 pounds at most. Having a massive frunk to securely store all your crap in is unexpectedly the nicest thing ever. It has a full-size truck bed for normal truck activities like purchasing a single 2x4 from Home Depot. This Silverado's pedestrian sound sounds pretty cool. It has 120 volt outlets all over it and a single 240 volt 30 amp outlet in the bed with enough offboarding power to charge an entire other car or back up your whole house for multiple days. The software is perfectly adequate. It's Android Automotive based, which I very much like, and because this is a 24 model year General Motors product, this also has Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. They got rid of it after this year. This DC fast charge is faster than any other electric truck on the market, and the massive over 200 kilowatt hour battery has far more range than you need. And I mean that. If you don't plan to tow very often or at all, you do not need the max range battery pack. Go for the standard or extended range battery packs. They're a lot cheaper, even on the used market. And the extended range battery is still 170 kilowatt hours. Although do keep in mind, if you plan to do any sort of road tripping, that the smaller battery pack options don't DC fast charge quite as well. All of the battery pack options do 10 to 80% in about 40 minutes, but obviously if you have a smaller battery, that 80% charge isn't going to take you quite as far. And assuming you're charging from home, fueling this thing costs way less than gas or diesel. Especially now. And there's basically no maintenance outside of tires and wipers and that sort of thing. Now I do wish it was a bit nicer inside and had a few more features, but I chose the work truck spec. I knew what I was getting into, and what I was getting into was a very basic interior with vinyl seats and rubber floors. At least it has adaptive cruise and automatic dual zone climate control. But seriously, would it have killed them to give the seat a height adjustment? You can't adjust the height at all, and that's very silly. As a daily driver, this is a ridiculous vehicle, but as a truck, for doing truck stuff, fantastic! 10 out of 10, would buy again, definitely recommend. Having used this for a year is going to make it real hard to go back to using my gas F-150, what with its gutless V8, its multiple gear ratios, and its rub two hard things together braking system. How archaic. And I do genuinely mean that. The entire second half of this video is about problems I've had relating to this truck, but I wouldn't let any of them dissuade me from buying it again or buying any other GM electric vehicle product. This is just so good. That said, I am still getting rid of this. The plan was always to have it for just a year to experience life with an electric truck, and I've done that now. And let's be sensible, I already have another truck to use. This video is sponsored by Brunt Workwear, and to prove how tough these boots are, I'm going to run over my actual foot with this actual truck. These are the Marin style boots. They're comfortable right out of the box, and I like the way they look. And these have the comp toe in them. Brunt's comp toe is a composite toe that's much lighter than a traditional steel toe. But is it as strong? You don't have to get the comp toe if you don't want to. You could get no toe reinforcement, or you could get the Brunt toe, which is the comp toe plus some additional protection on the outside of the boot. Yes, I'm stalling. And you can also get them made in the US if you prefer. Isn't that fun? But Brunt. Fine. Okay, right foot on the line, right there. Let's do this. Go slow. Oh, there it goes. Oh! A little more gas. Oh! It lived! My foot survived! And there we have it. My actual foot, well, a 3D printed copy of my actual foot, survived being run over by a truck in a pair of Brunt boots. I genuinely did not know if it was going to live through that. Oh, you thought I meant my flesh foot? No, what do you, no, I'm dumb, but I'm not stupid. There is a whole tire track on this boot now. If you want to get a pair of Brunt boots for yourself, go to bruntworkwear.com/agingwheels10 to get $10 off your first order of $60 or more. And thanks again to Brunt Workwear for sponsoring this video. I knew this plastic copy of my foot would come in handy. You laughed at me. Okay, now we can start getting into the negatives, starting with a list of small complaints. When you put the truck into trailer mode with this button right here, blind spot monitoring does not automatically turn off, which means it stays on, and because it sees the trailer in your blind spot, it just keeps blinking and flashing, which is especially annoying at night. Sometimes it will detect the trailer and turn off blind spot monitoring, but most of the time it doesn't. The built-in map's arrival state of charge estimator does not account for a trailer at all. So if you're towing, you have to either use napkin math or just guess to figure out how far to charge up to make it to the next stop. This also means the built-in route planning features are completely broken when you're pulling a trailer. Not that I use those anyway, I'm much better picking a charger than it is. The charge port is in a terrible place for towing. Most chargers are not pull-through, so you have to get real creative to avoid unhooking the trailer. And this is especially annoying if you're pulling a U-Haul cargo trailer, because those don't have jacks on them, so you can't feasibly unhook them yourself. GM, please move this charge port to the front right. That is my request. Power base was the name of the feature that allowed you to leave the truck off but keep the outlets on, but in a recent software update they renamed it to energy transfer. And the problem with this feature is that the truck, when you have this on, does not fully shut off. It appears to be off. All of the lights and screens and everything are off, but the infotainment stays on, and the annoying part is that Android Auto stays on. So if I have this truck off, but I want to keep the outlets on, every time I walk by it, it hijacks my phone and tries to connect up Android Auto, and that's annoying.
Having a massive battery is fantastic, except when it comes to AC charging. I've got a 40 amp EVSE here, which for any other EV is perfectly adequate, if not incredibly fast. But with the Silverado's massive battery, 50 to 80% on this thing takes 7 hours.
I had quite a few more complaints relating to the software in the first video with this thing because, quite frankly, it was a bit of a buggy mess. But I'm happy to report over several months and several software updates, the software is genuinely fixed now. It is not having any problems for quite some time. And the really annoying problem where if you had climate control on while DC fast charging, it would tank the charge rate, that has mostly been fixed. Not entirely, it will still dip down sometimes if you have climate control on while DC fast charging, but it used to absolutely tank the charging speed and it does not do that anymore, so good job GM. I would prefer if vehicles shipped from the factory completely finished, but that's apparently not how we do things anymore. Transition! Now it's time to talk about the service visits because this idiot has been into service for warranty repairs 7 separate times. Most of these issues were pretty small, 2 of them were medium-sized, and 1 of them caused the service department to give up entirely. This is a stack of all the service records. Issue number 1, from the factory, the outlets did not work. This ended up being a physical issue with the wiring harness that needed to be repaired. Again, this was an issue with the wiring harness from the factory. Great quality control. Although to be fair, this was a very early truck off the line, so maybe they hadn't quite figured things out yet, I guess. Issue number 2, power base, the function in there that's now called energy transfer, it didn't work at all. You hit the button, nothing would happen. So they fixed this one with a software update. Now this truck does get over-the-air software updates, but the software update they gave it at the dealership was somehow different? I don't know, but it worked afterward. Issue number 3, the left side DRL and turn signal was noticeably dimmer than the right side, so they replaced it under warranty. Easy. Issue number 4, the inside of the frunk would get wet after it rained. It wasn't leaking. What I think was happening was that when it was raining, water was collecting somewhere underneath the frunk, and then during the heat of the next day, that water would evaporate up, hit the underside of the hood, condense, and then drip down and soak everything in the frunk. They did not fix this issue. They just said they couldn't reproduce it and sent me on my way, and I can't say I'm terribly surprised. Okay, those last 4 issues I just mentioned were all part of the same service visit. I bundled them just to save time. And when I went to pick up the truck from that service visit, as soon as I got out onto the road, the fender trim caught some air and peeled back. Now I took it straight back to the dealership, they reattached it, and then ordered a new part free of charge to replace the one that was now bent. What I thought happened here, and what I seem to remember them confirming, is that when they replaced the DRL, they didn't properly reattach the trim piece, and then it flew off as soon as it caught wind. But what I didn't realize until reviewing the footage and the service records is that they replaced the left side DRL, but it was the right side fender trim that flew off. So I'm confused now. Issue number 5 was a slightly bigger deal. The 12-volt battery died while the truck was charging. I woke up to a notification from OnStar that there was a charging error, and when I went out to the truck, it was completely dead.
Ah, so that's why it wouldn't charge.
So I charged up the 12-volt battery myself, which took a lot longer than I expected it to.
All right, now that you've been on a 12-volt battery charger for a hot minute, do you work? Not the best sign.
But eventually I got it charged up enough that the truck would actually turn on.
Good, all the warning lights are on. I'm sure that's a fantastic, yep.
And again, the next night, while the truck was actively charging, the 12-volt battery died.
Day 2, it faulted out again last night. Will it turn on? I didn't even hit the brake pedal yet, so that's a no.
This seemed like a bigger issue than just a dead 12-volt battery, because while the truck is actively charging, the DC to DC converter should absolutely keep the 12-volt battery alive. So I scheduled a service appointment, and overnight I charged the 12-volt battery so the truck would come on and I could just drive it to the dealership. So what did they do to it while it was in for service? Well, naturally, they topped up the 12-volt battery, just like I did nothing else, and it never died again. They even tested the battery and said, yeah, it's fine. So why did it die in the first place? And why has it never died since? Stupid truck. And finally, the big issue, which wasn't actually that big of an issue. If you watch the road trip video where me and Alec used this thing to tow a Dakota out to California, you'll already know what the issue was. At some point in Wyoming, the truck stopped reconfiguring its battery pack into the series configuration to charge at 800 volts like it's supposed to, and instead got stuck in the parallel configuration and charged at 400 volts for the entire rest of the trip, which roughly doubled the charge time at every stop. If you didn't understand most of what I just said there, don't feel bad. The service department didn't understand it either. Before we continue, I'd like to explain some basic battery and electricity concepts, as well as how the truck works, so you can fully understand what went wrong with my truck and also why I found my service experience so frustrating. And maybe you'll learn something too. We're going back to basics. Battery voltage at the cell level is determined by the state of charge of the cell. And with an NMC chemistry lithium cell, like the Silverado uses, that relationship looks a little something like this. Now, this is resting voltage. If the cell's being charged, those voltage values will be pushed up a little bit, and if it's being discharged, they'll be pulled down a little bit, but this is the gist of it. Oh, and the nominal voltage of a cell is roughly the middle value of its voltage range. An NMC chemistry lithium cell is typically said to have a nominal voltage of 3.6 volts. The nominal voltage of this lithium iron phosphate cell is 3.2 volts. If I wire up two of these cells together in parallel, so negative to negative, positive to positive, the voltage does not change. But if I wire these two cells together in series, so positive, negative, then the voltage of the two cells gets added together. The relationship between voltage, current, and power is very simple. The voltage times the current equals the power. The unit for power is watts, and the unit for current is amperes. So if I'm flowing 1 amp of current into this battery cell at 3.5 volts, then I'm charging it at 3.5 watts of power. By the way, this is battery voltage, and this is the target voltage that the cell is charging up to. If I want to charge two of these cells together, well, I'm going to want to double the charging power so it doesn't take twice as long. And to do that with these two cells wired together in parallel, I need to double the amperage. And if I want that same 7 watts with the two wired together in series, then I have to double the voltage. Current is the part of the equation that generates heat, and the relationship between current and heat losses is nonlinear. If you double the current, you quadruple the amount of heat-related losses. So, super generally speaking, if you're trying to increase the power, it's preferable to increase the voltage rather than the amperage. A DC fast charger is a big external charger that connects directly to the battery in your vehicle. It's essentially exactly what I'm doing here, but on a much larger scale. Every electric vehicle from General Motors, except the Bolt, uses the same battery modules. This is what they used to call their Ultium battery architecture, but I don't know if they're sticking with that name anymore. It's GM. They're hard to figure out. Each one of these Ultium battery modules consists of 24 NMC chemistry lithium pouch cells wired together in an 8S3P configuration, which is to say 8 groups in series of 3 cells in parallel. The nominal voltage of each cell is 3.6 volts, so the nominal voltage of the whole module is 28.8 volts. For some examples, the Equinox EV uses 10 of these modules in series for a nominal pack voltage of 288. The Cadillac Lyriq uses 12 of these modules for a nominal pack voltage of 345, and the standard range Sierra and Silverado EVs use 14 of these modules for a nominal pack voltage of 403. But the extended and max range battery packs in the Silverado EV, Sierra EV, Hummer EV, and Escalade IQ are different. Those battery packs are 20 and 24 modules, respectively, but those modules are not all wired together in series. 20 modules in series would be 576 volts nominal, and 24 modules would be 691. It was likely uneconomical for GM to design high voltage components, motors, inverters, etc., to operate at such high voltages. So instead, the 20 and 24 module packs are split in half. The 20 and 24 module battery packs are double stacked. The upper and lower halves of these battery packs are each 10 or 12 modules wired together in series, but the two halves are wired together in parallel. So despite the 20 and 24 module packs being double the capacity of the 10 and 12 module battery packs, they have the same voltage. And operating at these relatively lower voltages is totally fine for everything. except for DC fast charging. Because a lot of the public infrastructure, and indeed the high voltage cables running into the Silverado's battery pack, are limited to 500 amps continuous. If we take the 24 module battery pack as an example, because that's the battery pack my truck has in it, well, we have 345 volts nominal multiplied by 500 amps, and you get 172 kilowatts. Again, the real number would be a little bit higher because voltage would be pushed up while it's charging, but let's just call it 172 kilowatts. And 172 kilowatts is not a lot of charging power when you remember the battery pack is well over 200 kilowatt hours. 172 kilowatts would mean it would take roughly an hour for the pack to charge to 80%, and that would suck on road trips. That's why, for DC fast charging, the 20 and 24 module battery packs in the Silverado and all the others physically reconfigure themselves. Instead of the two halves being wired together in parallel, for DC fast charging only, the two halves get wired together in series, which doubles the voltage and therefore doubles the available charging power at 500 amps. This is what allows the extended range Silverado to charge it up to 310 kilowatts and the max range to charge up to 370 kilowatts. This can also be helpful at lower power chargers too. For example, this 180 kilowatt charger has cables that are limited to 300 amps. So the only way you can actually get 180 kilowatts out of this thing is if your battery voltage is 600 volts or higher. Quick aside, I've been discussing everything in terms of nominal voltage, but typically EV battery packs are split into two groups, 400 volts and 800 volts. Anything with a voltage of less than 500 is considered a 400 volt battery, and anything with a voltage greater than 500 is considered an 800 volt battery. So the 20 module Silverado's pack in the series configuration, even though it's not even 600 volts nominal, that's still considered an 800 volt battery. It's more of a classification than anything else. And I'm telling you this because from now on, instead of referring to the Silverado's battery pack as in the series configuration or in the parallel configuration, I'm just going to call it 800 volt mode and 400 volt mode. It's much easier. As a real life demonstration of just how much charging time is saved by the Silverado being able to charge in 800 volt mode, I recorded two 20 to 80% charge sessions, one in 400 volt mode and one in 800 volt mode. Yes, I realize that 10 to 80% is the much more common metric, but do you know how massive the Silverado's battery pack is? I saved like 40 miles of driving by only having to drain the battery down to 20% instead of 10%. Anyway, for the 800 volt session, I took it to this 400 kilowatt Iona station. Right off the bat, it pulled 500 amps from the charger. As battery voltage slightly increased, so did charging power, getting up near 370 kilowatts. Then around 30%, it started tapering off, and it tapered off pretty linearly all the way down to 80%. The peak charge power of this session was 365 kilowatts, the lowest charge power was 194 kilowatts, and the average charging power was 253 kilowatts. This session, from 20 to 80%, took 30 minutes and 30 seconds. And for the next charge session, I forced the truck to stay in 400 volt mode. And how do you do that? Well, I took it to a Tesla supercharger. You see, Tesla is way behind in charging technology, and as of this recording, there are only 3 superchargers in the world that are 800 volt capable. All the rest of them are capped at 500 volts. What are you doing, Tesla? Even this 50 kilowatt EVgo dumpster is 800 volt capable. Anyway, that means if I take the Silverado to a supercharger, it will charge in 400 volt mode because it literally can't charge in 800 volt mode. Right from the get-go, the truck pulls 500 amps from the charger, which in 400 volt mode equates to about 180 kilowatts. Power climbs slightly as battery voltage rises, but at 10 minutes exactly to prevent the cables from overheating, current drops from 500 amps down to 400 amps, which equates to roughly 150 kilowatts. Again, power climbs slightly as battery voltage increases, but it never exceeds 155 kilowatts before the battery hits 80%. The peak charge power of this session was 181 kilowatts, the lowest speed was 145, and the average speed was just 153. This session took 48 minutes and 50 seconds. So compared to the 800 volt session, the 400 volt session on average charged 100 kilowatts slower and took nearly 20 minutes longer. Hopefully you can see why they added the extra cost and complication to make these trucks charge at 800 volts. If they didn't, the 10 to 80% time would be an hour. And by the way, it's for this reason that anytime I see a Silverado or Hummer or Escalade or whatever charging at a supercharger, I just think, what are you doing? Anyway, with all of that out of the way, hopefully everything I say makes sense when I say, and the problem I had with my truck was that it stopped charging at 800 volt mode. It got stuck in 400 volt mode. This happened somewhere in Wyoming on the Missouri to California and back road trip. No matter what the conditions were, no matter what charger we stopped at, no matter what we did to try to fix it, at every single charger it was charging at 400 volts from Wyoming to California all the way back to Missouri again. You know that example charging session I showed you earlier at a Tesla supercharger? Well, that's how this was charging at every charger, not just the Tesla superchargers. I estimate this added an extra 5 hours of charging time to the overall trip. Not ideal. Now, the problem could have been a lot worse. The truck still worked and we were able to make it all the way back home, but this was annoying. But when I took it into service for this issue, they didn't seem to understand what I was talking about. All they seemed to understand was that it wasn't charging as quickly as it was supposed to, but that's not the problem. It's the symptom. And there's loads of other explanations that could have led to that same symptom. Maybe I plugged it into a 150 kilowatt charger. Maybe I plugged it in with a cold battery. Maybe there was something wrong with the charger. But none of those were the issue. The issue was that the truck wasn't reconfiguring the battery pack to charge at 800 volts like it was supposed to. So when I took this in for service the first time for this issue, they didn't understand what was going on. They took the truck back, they cleared some unrelated codes, then they tested it on the 120 kilowatt charger they have at the dealership, which would have shown them nothing of value. And then just 2 days later, they called me to tell me it was fixed. Based on what the service advisor had told me over the phone, I know there was a pretty slim chance that it had actually been fixed, but I had to prove it. So when I picked the truck up, I took it straight to an Iona charging station because Ionas show charging voltage. I proved that it was still not charging at 800 volts like it was supposed to.
That's the wrong number.
And I took it straight back to the dealership, where it stayed for the next 1.5 months. To be completely fair, during this 1.5 month time period was Christmas and New Year's, and after that, they called me to say that they were waiting on advice from some higher up, and if I needed to use the truck, I could come pick it up at any time while they were waiting to hear back from whoever they were waiting to hear back from. I opted to leave it at the dealership because A, I have another truck to use, but also I didn't want him to forget about it. But anyway, I dropped this off on December 18th, and on January 30th the next year, they called me to say it was fixed. Again, what the service advisor told me over the phone didn't make any sense at all, and I assumed the truck was probably not fixed, but I picked it up from the dealership, took it straight to an Iona to prove it, and they had actually fixed it this time. It was charging at 800 volts like it was supposed to.
Charging has started. Oh God. Charging details. It's working!
So what did they do to fix the problem? This is a software update. Okay, it's a little more complex than that. The service report called it vehicle-wide programming, which I think means they reflashed all the modules. This makes it seem like they were just kind of guessing, but it doesn't matter because it worked. So after I got the truck back and it was fixed, I enjoyed using it. I was charging at full speed at 800 volts like it was supposed to. It wasn't excruciatingly slow, and I enjoyed it for 1 whole week, and then on a trip to Illinois, it got stuck in 400 volt mode again. So of course, I took it straight back to the dealership where it stayed for another month, and then eventually I got a call from them saying, and I'm paraphrasing, "Hey, we don't know what's wrong with your truck. We're giving up on it. Please come get it." Now, when it got stuck in 400 volt mode on the long road trip, it was truly stuck. No matter what charger we plugged into, it would not charge at 800 volts. But when it got stuck in 400 volt mode on the small trip to Illinois, I didn't try it on any other charger, and it must have been a one-time fluke that it was charging at 400 volts at this Iona, because when I picked it up from the dealership for this third service visit for this issue, it was charging at 800 volts like it was supposed to, which is irritating for 2 reasons. One, they didn't do anything to it, it just happened to fix itself. And also, I had started the buyback process with GM so they could buy this thing back because it had been in service and they didn't know what to do. But now that it was fixed and charging at 800 volts like it was supposed to, the buyback got denied. I have never before been disappointed that a vehicle is not broken. Since picking it up from that third service visit for this same issue, I've been daily driving this thing. I have not been AC charging it. I've only been DC charging it in hopes that it will break again. But it won't! It just keeps charging at 800 volts like it's supposed to. The problem itself was annoying, but almost equally as annoying was the service experience, because the service techs didn't seem to understand the basics of charging or the basic architecture of the Silverado's battery pack. Now, I mentioned the first time I took it in for service to try to get this issue fixed, they tested to see if they'd fix the problem by plugging it into the 120 kilowatt charger they have at the dealership. But what I didn't mention is what they wrote about that in the service record. They wrote, and I quote, "Vehicle fully charged in 21 minutes and no code set." The context that is missing that I can see from the My Chevrolet app is that 21 minutes was to go from 70 to 80%. What did that show? And because they plugged it in with a stone cold battery, the peak charge rate of that session was just 68 kilowatts. That would have shown them nothing of value. But because they didn't know what they were looking for and the truck wasn't throwing any codes, they saw that it was charging, thought, well, it must be fixed, and gave it back to me. They also pretty clearly demonstrated to me a lack of understanding of the relationship between voltage, current, and power. I remember the first time the service advisor called me to tell me the truck was fixed for this issue, he used the terms voltage, current, and power interchangeably and didn't make a lick of sense. And on the service report for that first visit, he wrote, "Will also have to be at optimum conditions to charge at 800 volts. When not at optimum conditions, will not charge at full voltage." And that's just nonsense. That's not at all how voltage works. Now, that last sentence could make sense if you replace the word voltage with power, but at that point, you're accusing me of charging it with a cold battery, and that's why it's not charging as quickly as it was supposed to. But that's not the problem. The reason it wasn't charging as quickly as it was supposed to was because the pack wasn't switching to 800 volts like it was supposed to, but they didn't seem to understand that. To be clear, I am not making fun of the people in the service department. I'm not even mad at them, nor do I blame them for this. They're all hardworking people. Everyone I talked to was so nice. They seem to be otherwise very good at their job. They just seem to have gaps in their knowledge relating to the problem at hand. And I'd argue that's not even their fault, it's the fault of their training. Now, I'm telling you this about the people in the service department to point out that if they have these gaps in their knowledge, then they're lacking the fundamental basis of understanding required to understand the problem the truck was having. I mean, how is Lassie going to tell you that Timmy's stuck in the well if you don't know what a well is? Lassie's just going to have to tell you that Timmy's gone missing, and that doesn't convey the same point, does it? Okay, that said, I do want to make fun of them a little bit, because on the third service report, they wrote this: 800-volt chargers take time to warm up if no one has used them lately. And that gave me a chuckle, because that's not all how chargers work. That's complete nonsense. You might as well tell me I'm running low on blinker fluid. At the beginning of this video, I said that GM needs to make a change. And my suggestion for what GM needs to change is very precise. Right now, if this truck fails to reconfigure the battery pack to 800 volts at an 800 volt capable DC fast charger, it doesn't say anything's wrong. It doesn't show an error message. It doesn't set an internal code, nothing. And that's a problem, because something is wrong. If this set a code when it failed to switch over to 800 volts like it's supposed to, when it's supposed to, it wouldn't matter if the service techs understand how the battery works or know what to look for. The truck would have a code that said, hey, here's the problem, and they would have an actionable item to work with. But instead, it doesn't set a code, the service techs didn't know what to look for, they didn't understand the problem, and it's been over 2 months in service. I've had 2 other Silverado EV owners reach out to me who have had this exact same issue with their truck, where it refuses to charge at 800 volts. And both of them had this issue happen in the middle of a long-distance towing road trip. And neither one of them could get the service techs at their local dealership to fix or even understand what the issue was. So GM, have this thing set a code, please. Okay, I've now said everything I want to say about this vehicle, and now it's time to sell it. I'm not selling it because of anything to do with the truck. I'm selling it because the monthly insurance and loan payment on this thing is raking me over the coals, and I'd like it to stop. Besides, I already have another pickup. It's worse, but it's paid for, and the insurance is a lot cheaper than this is. In fact, the only reason I still have this is because I'm currently trying to get the buyback reprocessed. I kind of doubt it'll go through, but that'll get me more money than just selling it will, so it's worth a shot. I only plan to keep this a year for the experience. I've done that, and now it's time to move on to the next experience, which is, well, if you were paying attention in this video, you'll already know what the next experience is. The vehicle that'll make me wish I could have a bad service experience. Oh God.